What if I told you that the weeds you've been yanking out of your yard every single weekend, the ones you stuff into trash bags and haul to the curb without a second thought, are worth more per pound than most crops any farmer in America grows today? Not as a metaphor, not as some feel-good nature story, literally worth more. Some of these plants sell for $40, $50, even $80 a pound in health food stores, specialty markets, and supplement companies that know exactly what they're buying, even if you don't. For thousands of years, the people who built this country knew these plants by name. The Cherokee healers, the Appalachian granny whip, the pioneer homesteaders who crossed the Great Plains with nothing but a wagon and a knowledge of the land. They knew which plants stopped bleeding on a battlefield, which ones broke a fever in the dead of winter when the nearest doctor was 3 days' ride away, which ones fed entire families when the harvest failed and there was nothing left in the root cellar. And then we forgot. We paved over the meadows. We sprayed herbicide on the roadsides. We hired lawn companies to eliminate every plant that didn't come in a nursery pot with a little plastic tag. We called them weeds like that single word meant worthless. And we walked away from the most abundant, most generous, free pharmacy that nature has ever put in front of us. Today, that changes. I'm going to show you 20 wild weeds that healers, foragers, and herbalists have treasured across centuries. Plants with real documented history. Plants that modern science is finally beginning to understand, catching up to what your great-grandmother already knew from memory. And here's the part that should stop you. Cold. Most of these plants are probably growing within 100 feet of where you're sitting right now. It's cheeky around because number 7 on this list was used by Civil War field surgeons to stop soldiers from bleeding to death on the battlefields of Virginia and Tennessee, and you've been mowing right over it every spring. And number 20. That's the plant aspirin, was literally invented from. It's still growing wild in ditches and along stream banks all across America. Free, untouched, waiting for someone to remember what it is. Let's begin. Number 1, chickweed Stellaria media, the cold weather healer. When the ground is still cold and every other plant in the garden is still asleep, chickweed is already there. Small, delicate, growing low against the earth with tiny star-shaped white flowers. So fine, you'd walk right past them if you weren't paying attention. The Latin name tells the whole story, meaning little star of the fields. And that name was earned over thousands of years of human experience with this quiet, persistent little plant. The Ojibwe nation used chickweed poultices on swollen joints and inflamed skin for generations before European settlers ever arrived on this continent. When those settlers came, they brought their own respect for chickweed with them from the old country, where European folk healers had called it starweed and kept it close through the winter months when nothing else was green and growing. In colonial America, before there was a pharmacy on any corner, chickweed was one of the first plants a skilled homesteader woman would reach for when the skin flared up, when a rash spread, when joints swelled in the February cold. Modern science has now confirmed what all of those people already knew from living it. Chickweed contains compounds called saponins and flavonoids that genuinely calm skin inflammation and relieve itching. The anti-inflammatory and mild analgesic effects on skin tissue have been validated in research. This isn't folk legend. This is chemistry that worked before chemistry had a name. Here's how you make it work today. Gather a large handful of fresh chickweed, and you won't have trouble finding it because it grows in gardens, lawns, and disturbed soil all across North America from late winter through spring. Pack it loosely into a clean glass jar. Pour warm olive oil over it until the plant material is completely submerged. Seal the jar and let it sit in a cool, dark place for 4 to 6 weeks, or gently warm it over very low heat for 4 to 6 hours if you want it faster. Strain out all the plant material through cheesecloth. Then melt in 1 ounce of beeswax for every cup of infused oil, stir well, and pour into small tins before it's set. What you have now is a skin-healing salve that outperforms half of what lines the first aid aisle at the drugstore. Apply it to eczema, psoriasis, dry cracked skin, rashes, and insect bites. And it cost you exactly nothing because it was growing in your garden and you were going to pull it up anyway. It's the first plant to arrive every year. Like it knows you're going to need it before you do. Number 2, dandelion taraxacum. Officinale, the weed that is actually a pharmacy. This one you already know. You've seen it your entire life. And I promise you, you have absolutely no idea what you're actually looking at. Taraxacum officinale de dandelion, the plant that American lawn culture declared war on sometime around 1950 and has been losing to ever since. There's a reason it keeps coming back no matter what you throw at it. Nature doesn't give up on something this important. Here's what most people don't know. Dandelion was listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia, the official national reference for drugs and medicines, from 1831 to 1926. That's nearly 100 years of official recognition. Pharmacies stocked it. Doctors prescribed it. It was considered legitimate medicine by the American medical establishment. And then the synthetic pharmaceutical industry arrived, and a plant that had been healing people for 2,000 years got reclassified as a lawn pest because you can't patent a flower that grows in every crack in the sidewalk. The Cherokee Nation used dandelion root for heartburn and kidney disease long before European contact. Medieval European settlers fermented the flowers into wine specifically to support liver health through the long winter months. Appalachian healers kept dried dandelion root in their medicine kits alongside their other most trusted plants. Every single part of this plant is edible and medicinal. The root, the leaves, and the flower. Every single part. Modern research has given us the chemistry behind what those generations of healers knew by experience. Dandelion root stimulates bile production and supports the liver's natural detoxification processes. The leaves are a natural diuretic. They help your kidneys flush excess fluid. But here's what makes dandelion leaves extraordinary compared to pharmaceutical diuretics. Most prescription water pills strip potassium from your body as a side effect, requiring you to take supplements to compensate. Dandelion leaves are loaded with potassium. They give back what most medicines take away. The inulin in the root also feeds beneficial gut bacteria, acting as a prebiotic long before that word existed in the wellness vocabulary. Here's one of the most satisfying things you can do with dandelion root. Dig the roots in the fall when they're at their most concentrated. Wash them thoroughly, chop them into small pieces, and spread them on a baking sheet. Roast them at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 40 minutes until they're deep brown and fragrant. Let them cool, grind them, and brew them exactly like coffee. 1 tablespoon per cup. The result is a rich, dark, earthy beverage with 0 caffeine that supports your liver every single morning. Your great-great-grandmother made this on the frontier and didn't need a label or a barista to explain why. She just knew it made her feel better. The weed this country has been trying to kill for 100 years is still healing everyone wise enough to let it grow. Number 3. Stinging nettle Urtica dioica, the plant that bites back and then heals everything. This plant is going to sting you before you respect it. That's the lesson stinging nettle has been teaching people for as long as people have been walking through fields. And every generation has to learn it the same way, by reaching in without gloves and pulling back fast. Urtica dioica. The name comes from the Latin word meaning I burn. And it does. Those tiny hollow hairs on the leaves and stems act like miniature hypodermic needles, injecting formic acid, histamine, and serotonin into your skin on contact. The initial reaction is immediate and unmistakable. But here's the secret that every traditional healer on every continent already knew. Once you cook it, steam it, or dry it, those stingers collapse completely. The burning compounds break down in heat, and what you're left with after that transformation is one of the most nutritionally dense wild plants on the face of the earth. Stinging nettle contains more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk by dry weight, significant magnesium, vitamins A, C, and K in abundance, more protein than almost any other wild green available. The plant that stings you is trying to feed you, if you'll just treat it right first. Traditional German and Austrian herbalists used nettle specifically for arthritis, and not just as a tea. A practice called urtication, which involved actually flogging arthritic joints with fresh nettles, was documented across medieval Europe as a treatment for rheumatic pain. Before you dismiss that as pure folk superstition, consider this: modern rheumatology studies have confirmed that nettle extracts genuinely reduce inflammatory markers in arthritis patients. The sting itself introduces compounds that create a localized anti-inflammatory response. The old European healers weren't making it up. They were observing real results from real medicine. Traditional German herbalists also used nettle root specifically for prostate health, an application that has since been validated by clinical research showing measurable improvements in benign prostatic hyperplasia symptoms. Here's the most powerful way to use stinging nettle at home. In early spring, pull on a pair of thick gloves and gather the young tops, the first 4 to 6 inches of new growth. Fill a quart mason jar loosely with the fresh plant material. Pour boiling water over everything until the jar is full, and put the lid on immediately to trap the volatile compounds. Let it steep for a minimum of 4 hours, or ideally overnight. In the morning, strain out the plant material and drink 1 to 2 cups of that dark green liquid throughout the day. This is not herbal tea the way most Americans think of it. This is a concentrated mineral tonic. Dense, earthy, and deeply nourishing. Your bones will begin to recognize it within a few weeks of consistent use. Let it sting you once. Learn its name. Then let it heal you for the rest of your life. Number 4, Lamb's Quarters Chinapodium album, the superfood growing in your compost pile. Somewhere in America right now, a farmer is spraying herbicide on this plant. And somewhere else in the same country, a chef in Brooklyn or Portland is paying $15 a pound for it at a specialty produce market, labeling it wild, harvested heirloom greens on a menu that costs $40 an entree. Chinapodium album, Lamb's Quarter, the wild green that has fed humanity for over 30,000 years and that most modern Americans treat as garbage. Let that number land for a second. 30,000 years. Seeds of this plant were found in the stomach contents of Toland men, a 2,400-year-old body preserved in a Danish peat bog, one of the most studied archaeological discoveries in Northern European history. Lamb's quarters was a staple food for Native American tribes across the entire continent, from the desert Southwest to the northern Great Plains. 19th century American homesteaders gathered it as one of their first fresh greens of spring. It grows on every continent except Antarctica, in every soil condition, in every climate zone across North America, and most people call it a weed and throw it straight in the trash. The young leaves contain more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk by weight, and significant amounts of vitamins A, B complex, and C. The seeds, harvested in late summer and ground into flour, sustained entire indigenous communities through brutal winters when nothing else was available. This is not a marginal plant with marginal nutrition. This is a nutritional powerhouse that grows for free, requires zero attention, and shows up every year without being asked. Modern nutritional analysis confirms every bit of what traditional cultures understood through lived experience. Lamb's quarters is genuinely more nutritious by most measures than the spinach and Swiss chard we pay premium prices for at the grocery store. Here's how to use it. The young leaves in spring and early summer are the most tender and can be eaten raw in salads or added fresh to smoothies for a serious nutrition boost without any noticeable flavor impact. Steam them for 3 minutes. Dress them with olive oil, lemon juice, and a pinch of salt, and you have a side dish that would make any fine dining chef proud. In late summer, when the plant goes to seed, you can harvest the seed heads, dry them thoroughly, and grind them into a dark, nutrient-dense flour that can be mixed with regular flour for flatbreads, pancakes, or biscuits that are more nutritious than anything you'll find in the bread aisle. The food that sustained this continent for thousands of years. Still growing in your garden, still waiting to be recognized. Number 5. Cleaver's Gallium aparini, the plant that clings to you and then cleanses you. You've met this plant. Guaranteed. You just didn't know its name. It's the one that sticks to your socks on a trail walk, that clings to your dog's fur after a run through the woods, that seems to grab at your jacket every time you push through the hedgerow or brush against the fence line. Those tiny hooked hairs catch on fabric and fur like nature's own Velcro witch. Incidentally, was invented after an engineer studied exactly this mechanism under a microscope. Gallium aparini cleavers, also called goosegrass, sticky willy, and catchweed, depending on where in America you grew up. And underneath all that sticky mischief is one of the most respected lymphatic herbs in the entire tradition of Western folk medicine. Medieval European healers prescribed cleavers specifically for swollen glands and lymphatic congestion. The 17th century English herbalist Nicholas Culpeper wrote that cleavers was a good remedy in the spring for cleansing the blood and lymph after a long winter of heavy, stagnant living. Folk healers across Appalachia, the Ozarks, and the rural American South used fresh cleavers as a spring tonic passed down through families for generations. The idea was always the same. After a winter of preserved foods, closed houses, and minimal movement, the lymphatic system needed to be stirred awake, and cleavers was the plant that did it. Modern herbal medicine recognizes cleavers as a gentle lymphagogue, a plant that encourages lymphatic flow and drainage with anti-properties and mild diuretic effects that support the body's natural detoxification pathways. Here's the essential thing to know about preparing cleavers, and this matters more than almost anything else you'll hear today. Do not heat this plant. Heat destroys the active constituents that make it effective. The traditional preparation is cold. Gather a generous double handful of fresh cleavers in early spring before it flowers. Put it in a blender with cold water. Blend it well, then strain it thoroughly through cheesecloth, pressing out every bit of liquid. What you have is fresh cleavers juice. Add 1 to 3 tablespoons of this juice to a glass of cold water and drink it daily for 2 to 3 weeks. This is the spring lymphatic reset that your body has been waiting for after months of winter. It's gentle, it's safe, And it's been working for people on this continent for centuries. The plant that keeps grabbing at you every time you walk past it is trying to get your attention for a reason. Number 6. Wood sorrel Oxalis aceticella, the woodland lemon drop. If you ever find yourself deep in the woods with nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and a long trail back to the trailhead, keep your eyes on the ground. If you spot a small plant growing close to the soil with 3 heart-shaped leaves folded down like little sleeping butterflies, stop. Pick one leaf. Fold it into your mouth. Oxalis aceticella wood sorrel will greet you with the most surprising burst of bright, clean, lemony tartness you've ever tasted from a wild plant. That sourness comes from oxalic acid, the same compound that gives rhubarb its distinctive temps. And in that little sour bite is a substantial hint of vitamin C that has been keeping people healthy in the forests for a very long time. During the age of exploration, sailors carried wood sorrel on long ocean voyages specifically because of its vitamin C content, which rivals citrus fruit by weight. Scurvy was one of the most feared diseases of that era, a slow, brutal deterioration caused entirely by vitamin C deficiency. And plants like wood sorrel were considered genuine lifesavers by navigators and ship's physicians who knew their botany. Native American children across the eastern woodlands and the Pacific Northwest ate wood sorrel as a trail snack on long journeys, and traditional healers used infusions of the plant to bring down fevers and soothe sore throats along the frontier. Here's how to enjoy it at home. Gather a cup of fresh wood sorrel leaves from an area you know is clean and free of pesticides. Place them in a jar or pitcher of cold water. Let them steep for 2 hours, and I want to emphasize this. Do not use hot water, because heat can concentrate the oxalates in a way that's less comfortable for your system. After 2 hours, add a squeeze of honey and stir it through. What you have is wild woodland lemonade, genuinely refreshing on a summer day, taut and bright in a way that nothing from a bottle can replicate. One important note. Wood sorrel is wonderful, enjoyed as an occasional snack or a light beverage, but it is not meant to be consumed in large amounts every day, especially if you have a history of kidney stones, because oxalates in high doses can contribute to that condition. Enjoy it the way the people who knew it enjoyed it, as a trail treat, a summer refreshment, a gift from the forest floor. Nature hid lemons in the woods. You just have to know where to look. Number 7. Yarrow Achillea millefolium, the soldier's herb. Here it is. Number 7. The one I told you about at the beginning. The legend says that Achilles, the greatest warrior of the ancient world, used this plant to staunch the wounds of his soldiers on the blood-soaked fields outside the walls of Troy. The story is 3,000 years old, and that's exactly where the Latin name comes from. Achillea millefolium, the plant of Achilles, the 1,000-leaved herb of warriors. The legend is mythology. The medicine is not. Yarrow has been found in Neanderthal burial sites over 60,000 years old. Let that sink in. Our ancestors, before they were even fully modern humans by anatomical classification, were already placing this plant with their dead, suggesting it was recognized as something important and powerful long before written language or organized medicine ever existed. Every major Native American nation across this continent had a name for yarrow and a use for it. The Cherokee, the Ojibwe, the Blackfoot, the Haut. Virtually universal recognition of this plant as a healer. Civil War field surgeons kept dried yarrow in their medical kits because when you're in a field hospital in Virginia in 1863 with no sterile equipment, new anesthesia, and men bleeding out on yarrow packed into a wound could mean the difference between life and death. They weren't being superstitious. They were being practical. Yarrow worked, and they knew it worked because they had seen it work. Modern science has given us the explanation for why yarrow contains a compound called acylane, along with specific flavonoids that genuinely shorten clotting time and promote hemostasis, the medical term for stopping bleeding. Published peer-reviewed research confirms these hemostatic properties are real and measurable. Beyond that, yarrow is also anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and a diaphoretic, meaning it opens the pores and promotes sweating, which is exactly what a body needs to break a fever efficiently. Here's how to use it. In a field situation, away from any areas that might be treated with chemicals, take a fresh yarrow leaf. Chew it briefly to break down the cell walls and pack it directly onto a bleeding cut. The bleeding will slow noticeably within minutes. At home, make a strong decoction by simmering 2 tablespoons of dried yarrow herb in 2 cups of water for 15 minutes. Strain it, let it cool enough to handle, and soak a clean cloth in the liquid. Apply it as a compress to minor wounds, bruises, varicose, veins, or areas of swelling and inflammation. For a fever, drink the same tea hot. Get under the covers and let your body do the work it's trying to do. Yarrow will help it do it faster. It has been on every American battlefield since before this was America. It's growing in meadows and roadsides and disturbed lots from Maine to California right now. It has never stopped being there. We just stopped knowing it. Number 8. Ground ivy Glitchioma hederaceae, the forgotten lung herb of the settlers. Before hops became the standard bittering agent in American beer, there was ground ivy. For centuries, long before the modern craft brewing movement and long before commercial hops farms dotted the Pacific Northwest, European brewers added Glissoma hederaceae to fermenting ale to clarify the liquid and add bitter. It was called alahoof. It was standard practice. It grew in every monastery herb garden on the continent. The monks who made medicinal beer in their stone buildings knew this plant the way modern Americans know aspirin as a reliable, trusted tool that you kept on hand because you knew it worked. And those same monks used it for something else entirely. For the lungs. For the heavy, stubborn chest congestion that settled in after a winter illness and just would not shift. They called it tunhuff, the herb that tunes the body. Traditional healers across the Appalachian Mountains and the rural American South carried that same knowledge westward with the great migrations of the 18th and 19th centuries, using ground ivy as a standard remedy for head colds, bronchitis, and the kind of chronic sinus pressure that makes you feel like your head is full of wet concrete. Modern phytochemistry has identified rosmarinic acid and other anti-inflammatory phenolic compounds in ground ivy that validate the traditional respiratory use. The plant has genuine anti-inflammatory and mild expectorant effects on the mucous membranes of the respiratory tract. The simplest and most effective way to use it is with steam. Bring a pot of water to a full boil, then remove it from the heat. Add a large double handful of fresh ground ivy. Lean over the pot with a kitchen towel draped over your head and the pot, creating a steam tent. Close your eyes and breathe slowly and deeply for 10 minutes. The aromatic compounds will open your sinuses, begin to loosen congested mucus, and carry mild antimicrobial effects directly into the tissues where you need them most. Do this at the very first sign of a head cold coming on. Do it again the next morning. The difference between catching a cold early with something like this versus letting it dig in for 2 weeks is the difference between managing and suffering. Your grandmother's grandmother knew this. She just did it automatically, without being told, because it was knowledge that lived in the hands before it ever lived on paper. Number 9. Self-heal Prunella vulgaris. The plant that named itself, a plant so trusted by the people who knew it that they simply called it heal. Not a poetic name. Not a marketing label. A name that came from centuries of watching this plant work on wounds, on throats, on inflamed tissue, on inflations that wouldn't quit. Prunella vulgaris has carried names like heal-all, woundwort, self-heal, and all heal across every culture that has encountered it. The names are not exaggerations. They are records of accumulated human experience with a plant that consistently delivered. Traditional Chinese medicine has used self-heal for over 2,000 years under the name Xiaku Cow, meaning summer dry grass. And the applications in that tradition include liver conditions. Inflamed ice and lymphatic swelling uses that map closely onto the Western folk tradition. The 17th century English herbalist John Gerard wrote that self-heal was used against the swoonings and passings away, a remedy for when the body was seriously failing. Appalachian grandmothers applied crushed self-heal leaves to wounds and used the tea as a gargle for throat infections that persisted through winter. It was in the home medicine toolkit of rural America for 3 centuries. What modern research has found in this plant is genuinely fascinating. Self-heal contains rosmarinic acid, ursolic acid, and a flavonoid compound called hyperoside, all of which have documented antiviral and anti-inflammatory effects. A 2020 review found evidence that self-heal extracts disrupt bacterial biofilms, the protective structural layers the bacteria build around themselves to resist antibiotics and immune responses. This means self-heal doesn't just fight bacteria. It dismantles the defenses bacteria use to protect themselves from being fought. That's a mechanism that modern pharmaceutical research is actively trying to replicate synthetically. And this we'd figured it out millions of years ago. Here's how to put it to work in your home. Make a strong infusion from dried self-heal to heaping teaspoons per cup. Pour it over with just boiled water and steeped for a full 15 minutes with a small plate over the cup to keep the volatile compounds from escaping. Let it cool to a comfortable gargling temperature. Gargle with it 3 times a day for a sore throat, a mouth ulcer, or inflamed gum tissue. The relief for mouth and throat inflammation can begin within hours of the first application. You can also soak a clean cloth in the cooled tea and apply it directly to minor cuts and scrapes as a wound wash. This plant named itself. That's not arrogance. That's a 2,000-year guarantee. Number 10. Red clover trifolium protens, the field medicine hiding in plain sight. We're halfway through this list, and I want to pause for just a moment, because if you've been watching this far, you've already learned something that most people will never know. These are not weeds. They are teachers. They have been waiting in the fields and the roadsides and the forgotten corners of America since long before any of us were born. If you've already spotted one of these plants near your home, drop a comment below and tell me which one. And if this is the kind of content that matters to you, if you believe that this knowledge should stay alive, hit that like button right now because it helps this video find the people who need it. And if you haven't subscribed to Homestead Roots yet, come join us. This is what we do here. Now, let's keep going. Trifolium pratense, red clover. That field you drive past on your way to work every summer morning. The one carpeted in those soft rose-pink blooms buzzing with bees from the fence line all the way to the tree line. That is a medicine field. That is what a pharmacy looked like before there were pharmacies. The Iroquois nation used red clover for coughs, bronchial conditions, and lung disease for generations. European settlers who came to this continent brought their own deep respect for the plant. Using it as a blood purifier, their term for herbs that help the body process and eliminate waste more efficiently for chronic skin conditions, like eczema and psoriasis that didn't respond to simpler treatments. Appalachian and Ozark healers use long-term red clover infusions for skin problems and hormonal imbalances, understanding intuitively that some healing happens slowly and requires consistency over weeks, not a one-time fix. Modern research over the last 2 decades has validated the traditional use in ways that are clinically significant. Red clover contains isoflavones, plant compounds with mild estrogenic activity that have been studied extensively for menopausal symptoms. And the results have been consistent. Multiple clinical trials show measurable reductions in hot flash frequency and intensity. Studies have also shown positive effects on bone density and cardiovascular health markers in postmenopausal women. This isn't wishful thinking. This is a plant that belongs in serious conversations about women's health, and it grows freely in every meadow in America. Here's how to prepare it. Harvest the flower heads on a dry summer day from areas you are absolutely certain have not been treated with herbicides or pesticides. Dry them slowly on a clean surface at low temperature or in a dehydrator set to its lowest setting. Preserving the color and potency as much as possible, use 2 to 3 teaspoons of dried flowers per cup of just boiled water, steep for 15 minutes, and drink 2 cups daily. The taste is mild and slightly sweet, one of the more pleasant medicinal teas you'll encounter. Commit to drinking it consistently for several weeks before you evaluate the results, because red clover works slowly and gently, the way most of nature's real healers do. The medicine everyone is searching for at the pharmacy has been growing in the field down the street this whole time. Number 11. Shepherd's Purse Capsella bursipastoris, the tiny weed with a warrior's heart. Look closely at this plant and find the seed pods. Tiny triangles, each one shaped precisely like an old-fashioned leather purse from the frontier days, the kind a shepherd would have, worn on his belt, traveling the mountain meadows of 18th century Appalachia. That's the name. That's the entire identification guide. Find the tiny triangular purses on the stem, and you've found your plant. Capsella bursipastoris grows in the cracks of city sidewalks, in gravel driveways, in the thin, hard-packed, neglected soil at the margins of parking lots, and the edges of country roads where almost nothing else can survive. It is one of the toughest, most resilient plants in the North American weed catalog. And inside that toughness is one of the most powerful hemostatic herbs in the Western herbal tradition. Traditional midwives across rural America, the granny women of Appalachia, the curanderas of the Southwest, the European immigrant healers of the Midwest, used shepherd's purse as a primary remedy for excessive bleeding for centuries. It was in their herb bags, the way sutures are in a surgical kit today. The plant was listed in the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia with specific recognition of its hemostatic applications. Scientific studies have confirmed that it contains compounds that actively promote blood clotting, though researchers have noted that the exact molecular mechanisms are still not fully mapped, which is itself a remarkable acknowledgement from modern pharmacology. To make a shepherd's purse tincture at home, fill a clean mason jar halfway with fresh shepherd's purse aerial parts, the entire above-ground plant gathered when healthy and green. Cover the plant material completely with AIDA-proof vodka, making sure no plant material is sticking out above the liquid. Seal the jar tightly, label it with the date, and store it in a cool, dark place for 4 to 6 weeks, shaking it once a day whenever you think of it. After 6 weeks, strain the liquid through cheesecloth into a clean amber bottle. pressing out every drop of liquid from the plant material. Use 30 to 40 drops in a small amount of water as directed by a qualified herbalist. And I need to say this clearly. Do not use shepherd's purse if you are pregnant. This plant stimulates uterine contractions and has a long documented history of that effect in traditional midwifery, which means it is specifically not for use during pregnancy. And for any serious bleeding condition, please seek professional medical evaluation. This is a home first aid herb for minor situations, not a substitute for emergency care. Small plant. Fierce gift. The earth has always understood that real strength comes in modest packages. Number 12. Mugwort Artemisia vulgaris, the dream plant of ancient healers. In every culture that has ever encountered mugwort, and that means across Asia, across Europe, across indigenous North America, this plant has held a place not just in medicine but in ceremony. Not just in the herb garden but in the spiritual life of the people who grew it. That's not a coincidence. That's what happens when a plant is genuinely powerful and people pay close enough attention to notice. Artemisia vulgaris, named for the goddess Artemis, who in the ancient Greek world governed the wilderness, the hunt, and the health of women's bodies. Traditional Chinese medicine has used mugwort as the primary herb for moxibustion, a heat therapy applied directly to acupuncture points for over 3,000 years. The practice is still being performed daily in clinics in Beijing and Tokyo. Japanese healers burn it as magusa in acupressure treatments. Anglo-Saxon healers in early medieval England listed mugwort as the first of the 9 sacred herbs in an ancient medical text called the Laknanga, a document that is one of our oldest written records of English folk medicine. Among Native American nations of the Pacific Coast and the Great Basin, species of Artemisia have been used for everything, from ceremonial smudging to treating stomach complaints, fever, and respiratory congestion. The plant occupies a central place in the medicine traditions of cultures on every inhabited continent. From a modern herbal perspective, mugwort contains thujan siskiterpene lactonis and flavonoids that stimulate bile production, support liver function, and have documented effects on digestive health. Small amounts taken as a bit of tea before meals stimulate digestive enzyme production and encourage the liver to process food more efficiently. Here's the preparation for the digestive application. Use just a 1/4 teaspoon of dried mugwort per cup. Steep it for 10 minutes. No longer. Drink a small amount, no more than a 1/2 cup. 20 minutes before your largest meal of the day. The bitterness is significant and intentional. That bitterness is actually the mechanism. Bitter compounds on the tongue trigger a cascade of digestive responses that begin in the mouth and travel all the way through the GI tract. But I need to be direct with you about the safety profile here because mugwort is not for everyone. Do not use mugwort under any circumstances if you are pregnant. This plant has documented uterine stimulating effects and has been used historically in ways that make it categorically unsafe during pregnancy. Do not use it if you have a known allergy to ragweed or other plants in the Asteraceae family, and use it only in the small doses described, not in the large, strong infusions that you'd make for something like nettle or red clover. Start with the smallest amount and work with an experienced herbalist if you want to explore its full range of applications. The dreaming plant. The sacred weed, still growing at the edges of rivers and roadsides across this country, still holding its ceremonies whether or not anyone is paying attention. Number 13, Manos goldenrod Solidago canesis virgoria, the hay fever scapegoat that actually cures it every fall. Millions of Americans look at goldenrod, those tall, dramatic plumes of gold turning the roadsides and meadows to fire along every highway in the country, and they sneeze. And they blame it. This is one of the great botanical injustices in American popular culture, and it needs to be corrected. Goldenrod is innocent. Its pollen is heavy and sticky, carried by bees from flower to flower. It is physically incapable of becoming airborne in quantities large enough to trigger hay fever. The actual culprit is ragweed, which blooms at exactly the same time, produces pollen so light it travels 4 miles on the wind, and is nearly invisible compared to goldenrod's spectacular display. Ragweed causes the sneezing. Goldenrod catches the blame because it's the plant you can see. The irony is devastating because goldenrod doesn't just fail to cause your suffering, it has a documented history of treating the very kinds of conditions it gets blamed for. Solidago the genus name comes from the Latin meaning to make whole. European folk healers used it specifically for kidney inflammation, urinary tract infections, and chronic upper respiratory catarrh, that congested, inflamed state that keeps coming back season after season and never fully clears. The Cherokee Nation used goldenrod for fevers, sore throats, and as a wound herb. The German Commission E, which is the European equivalent of the FDA for evaluating herbal medicines, has officially approved standardized goldenrod extract for treating urinary tract conditions and helping prevent kidney stones. Multiple European nations have it in their official pharmacopoeia. Modern research has confirmed anti-inflammatory and genuine diuretic effects from the flavonoids and saponins in the flowering tops. Here's how to prepare it. Harvest goldenrod flower heads and the top leaves in late summer when the flowers are fully open. This is when the plant's medicinal compounds are at their most concentrated. Dry them thoroughly in a warm, well-ventilated space away from direct sunlight. Use 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried material per cup of just boiled water. Steep for 12 to 15 minutes. And drink 2 to 3 cups a day for up to 2 weeks when you're dealing with urinary discomfort or early signs of a kidney issue. And this is important. Drink plenty of plain water alongside this tea, because the diuretic effect needs adequate hydration to work properly and safely. The plant America blamed for its suffering has been quietly offering to help this whole time. Number 14, wild violet viola odorata. The spring medicine hiding in your lawn before you mow the lawn this spring. Stop. Get down low. Look at what's actually growing there. Those tiny purple faces looking up at you from the grass are viola odorata. Wild violet, and they are carrying more healing potential than most people's entire spice cabinet. Medieval monks grew violets in their physic gardens, specifically for respiratory medicine, for coughs, hoarseness, bronchitis, and the deep chest congestion of late winter that just wouldn't lift no matter what else you tried. European apothecaries made violet flower syrup that stayed in the British pharmacopoeia well into the 20th century. Frontier American healers used it for chest colds and fevers on the homestead. And here's a nutritional fact that should stop you cold. Wild violet leaves contain more vitamin C per unit of weight than oranges. The tiny purple flower you've been mowing over is nutritionally superior to the citrus fruit you're paying $3 a pound for at the supermarket. Both the flowers and the leaves are edible and medicinal. The plant contains mucilaginous polysaccharides that coat and soothe irritated mucous membranes in the throat, in the bronchial passages, in the digestive lining, providing genuine physical relief for inflamed tissue along the entire length of the respiratory and digestive tracts. Here's a preparation that is simple, effective, and one of the more beautiful things you can make from a wild plant. Fill a clean glass jar with fresh wild violet flowers gathered from your lawn or any area you know is pest. Pour just boiled water over the flowers until the jar is full. Put on the lid and let it steep overnight. In the morning, strain out the flowers. The liquid will be a stunning shade of deep purple blue from the anthocyanin compounds in the petals. For every cup of that violet-infused water, stir in 1 cup of raw honey until it's fully dissolved. Bottle it in a clean glass jar. Take 1 tablespoon for a sore throat, a dry cough, or respiratory irritation. Give it to your kids. It looks like magic, and it works like medicine that has been trusted since before this country existed. The spring gift looking up from the lawn, it was never asking for anything. It was always offering everything. We just kept mowing it down. Number 15. Burdock Artium lapa. The deep root that goes deeper than you think to harvest burdock properly. You need patience, a long-handled spade, and a willingness to work for what you get. The taproot of a mature burdock plant can go 18 inches straight down into the earth, sometimes deeper, accumulating nutrients and medicine in its dense, starchy core over an entire growing season. It doesn't give itself up. You have to earn it. Artium lapa burdock. Those bristled seed heads, the ones that stick to every piece of clothing you own if you walk anywhere near them in the fall, are directly responsible for the invention of Velcro. Swiss engineer George de Mestral pulled burdock burrs off his pants after a hike in 19, looked at them under a microscope, and used what he saw to build an entirely new fastening system that changed manufacturing and clothing forever. The entire hook on loop technology of the modern world came from this plant. That's how observant you have to be to notice what nature is teaching you. But the root had already been building human bodies for centuries long before anyone thought to study the burrs. Traditional Chinese medicine has used burdock root called niu bangen, that tradition for over 2,000 years, specifically for inflammatory skin conditions, boils, lymphatic congestion, and what TCM calls heat conditions in the body. Japanese cuisine celebrates burdock root as gobo, treating it as a prized vegetable rather than a weed, and it appears in everything from traditional stews to tempura preparations. Native American nations of the Northeast, including the Ojibwe and Lenape, used burdock root and leaf, both for skin conditions and joint inflammation, and as a general strengthening food for people recovering from illness. Modern research has identified 3 categories of beneficial compounds in burdock root: inulin, which is a prebiotic fiber that feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut microbiome. Arctogenin, which has documented anti-inflammatory and potentially antiviral properties. And chlorogenic acid, a powerful antioxidant also found in high amounts in coffee. The traditional understanding of burdock as a plant that supported liver function and digestive health has been validated by modern hepatoprotective studies showing measurable protective effects on liver tissue. Here's the simplest and most satisfying way to use it. Dig fresh burdock roots in the fall when the plant has put everything it has into the root for winter storage. Scrub them well under running water. Do not peel them, because the skin contains some of the highest concentrations of medicinal compounds. Slice the root into thin rounds. Toss them with olive oil, salt, and fresh rosemary. Spread in a single layer on a baking sheet and roast at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 25 to 30 minutes, flipping once halfway through until golden and slightly crispy at the edges. They come out earthy, slightly sweet, and deeply savory. Eat them as a snack. They feed your gut bacteria, support your liver, and taste like something a skilled chef would charge you $20 for at a farm-to-table restaurant in Nashville or Denver. The deepest route in the field, the last one anyone thinks to dig. Always the most worth finding. Number 16 Hawthorn crataegus, Managina the heart's guardian at the hedgerow in Ireland. You could reroute a highway before you cut down a hawthorn tree. That's not a figure of speech. In 1999, a proposed road through County Clare was literally redesigned at significant cost to avoid removing a solitary hawthorn tree that local people said was a fairy tree, a threshold between this world and the spirit world. Engineers and government officials working in the late 20th century with modern equipment and modern budgets moved a road rather than touch that tree. People who would do that had been watching the hawthorn for a very long time. And what they saw, across generations of observation that became woven into spiritual belief, was that this tree healed the heart, not metaphorically, literally. The berries, flowers, and leaves of Crataegus monagina contain a class of compounds called oligomeric, along with vitexin hyperoxide and quercetin, a combination of flavonoids and polyphenols that modern cardiology research has confirmed, dilates the coronary arteries, improves the contractile strength of the heart muscle, and reduces the resistance that the heart has to pump against. The German Commission E approved standardized hawthorn extract specifically for the treatment of mild to moderate cardiac insufficiency. Multiple randomized controlled trials have shown measurable improvements in exercise tolerance, reduced symptoms of early heart failure, and meaningful improvements in overall cardiac output. This is not folk belief wearing a lab coat. This is a plant that has been independently validated as a genuine cardiac therapeutic by serious clinical research. The traditional preparation that's been used in rural America and throughout the British Isles for centuries is a hawthorn berry syrup made in the fall when the berries are fully ripe and deep red. Simmer 2 cups of dried hawthorn berries in 4 cups of water for 30 minutes. Mash the softened berries with a wooden spoon to break them up. Then continue simmering for another 20 minutes. Strain the liquid through a fine mesh strainer, pressing every drop of liquid out of the berries. Measure the strained liquid and add an equal volume of raw honey. Stir until completely dissolved. Bottle in clean glass jars and refrigerate. Take 1 tablespoon of this syrup daily as a gentle, long-term cardiovascular tonic. But please hear this clearly. If you are on any cardiac medication, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, digoxin, or any other heart drug, hawthorn can interact with those medications in significant ways. This is not an herb you self-prescribe around existing cardiac treatment. Talk to your doctor before using it therapeutically if you are already being treated for a heart condition. The old Irish farmers knew something about this hedgerow tree. They just explained it differently than a cardiologist would. Number 17 Wild Garlic Allium ursinum, the forest floor pharmacy in early spring. Before the tree canopy fills in and closes off the light, there are forests in the eastern United States, in the Pacific Northwest, and throughout Appalachia, where the entire ground turns white. Star-shaped white flowers spread wall to wall between the tree roots, and before you even see them, you smell them. A wave of garlic so strong it rises from the forest floor and hits you 20 yards before you reach the trees. Bears emerging from hibernation seek this plant out as their first food of the year. That's where the Latin name comes from. Allium ursinum. The bears allium, and bears know exactly what they're doing. Wild garlic carries most of the same therapeutic sulfur compounds as the cultivated garlic you buy at the grocery store. Allicin diallo and related organosulfur compounds, but in the fresh green plant they're delivered alongside chlorophyll, fresh vitamins, and a gentler overall chemistry that many people find easier to tolerate than concentrated raw garlic. folk healers throughout rural America, particularly in Appalachian communities where ramps or related species have always been deeply valued, used wild allium species for cardiovascular health as an antimicrobial for intestinal infections, and for respiratory conditions. The European folk tradition was identical in its applications. Modern studies have confirmed antimicrobial, and cholesterol-modifying effects from the sulfur compounds in wild allium species, consistent with the extensive research based on cultivated garlic. Here's a preparation that preserves the most medicinally active compounds and also happens to taste extraordinary. Gather a generous double handful of fresh wild garlic leaves, the broad, shiny green leaves, not the flower stalk or bulb. Do not cook them. The active allicin compounds are volatile and partially destroyed by heat. Instead, add the fresh leaves to a blender with a quarter cup of pine nuts or walnuts, a quarter cup of good olive oil, the juice of half a lemon, and a generous pinch of salt. Blend until smooth. Taste and adjust. What you have is a wild garlic pesto that you can use on pasta, spread on bread, stir into soups just before serving, or use as a dip. Consume it raw to get the full benefit of those volatile sulfur compounds. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most flavorful things you will ever eat from a wild plant. One critical identification note: wild garlic shares its forest floor habitat with lily of the valley, which looks superficially similar and is poisonous. The identification rule is absolute. Wild garlic always smells strongly of garlic when a leaf is crushed. Lily of the valley has no garlic odor whatsoever. If you crush the leaf and smell garlic, you have your plant. If you crush the leaf and smell nothing or something sweet and floral, put it down and walk away. The bears find their way to the forest pharmacy every spring without a GPS. We just have to follow them. Number 18, white clover trifolium repents the lawn's most overlooked gift. When exactly did we decide a lawn should be a monarch? White clover was a standard component of American lawn seed mixes right up through the 1940s and into the 1950s. It was not considered a weed. It was considered a sign of a healthy, well-managed lawn. It fixed nitrogen directly from the air and fed the soil. It kept the grass green through summer droughts when pure grass lawns burned brown. It fed the bees and pollinators that were essential to every garden and orchard. And it thrived. Then the herbicide companies arrived, and they needed a problem to sell you a solution to. White clover was reclassified as a weed in the marketing materials of the lawn care industry specifically because it died when you sprayed it with the new broadleaf herbicides they were selling. If white clover was a weed, you needed the spray. If it was a feature, you didn't. The economics of that reclassification were not complicated, and the decision was made for you without your input. Before that decision was made, white clover had a centuries-long history as medicine on this continent. The Cherokee drank infusions of the flowers for fevers and respiratory congestion. Folk healers across the Appalachians used it as a spring tonic for general health and vitality after winter. The isoflavones in white clover flowers have documented anti-inflammatory effects and mild estrogenic activity similar to those in its close relative, red clover. Here's the simplest thing in the world. Find a patch of white clover that you know with absolute certainty has not been treated with any herbicide, pesticide, or lawn chemical. Harvest the flower heads on a dry summer day when they're fully open and at their most fragrant. Dry them in a single layer in a warm, well-ventilated spot out of direct sunlight for several days until they're completely dry and crumble. Use 2 teaspoons of dried flowers per cup of just boiled water, steep for 10 minutes, strain, and drink. The taste is mild, slightly sweet, faintly floral. It is one of the most pleasant herbal teas you will ever make, and it costs you nothing except the time to pick it. Let the clover back into your lawn. Let the bees come back. Let the nitrogen go back into the soil where it belongs. The lawn that looks perfect is the one that's doing the least for everyone who lives near it, including you. The lawn with clover in it is alive. Number 19, greater plantain, Plantego major, the green bandage that follows you everywhere. Native Americans who first encountered European settlers on this continent had a name for this plant that has survived in the ethnobotanical literature ever since. They called it white man's footprint because wherever the Europeans walked, this plant seemed to appear carried across an ocean in the mud of boots, establishing itself in every disturbed soil site that humans created, following the spread of a civilization like a quiet shadow. Those same Native Americans learned to use it before the Europeans who brought it even arrived. The observation of what this plant could do crossed cultural lines fast because what it does is visible and immediate. Plantego major. Greater plantain, the low-growing weed with oval-ribbed leaves and thin flower spikes that grows in every lawn, every garden, every disturbed roadside in America. You've walked past it 10,000 times. You're probably walking past it right now on your way to and from the car. In 2012, a clinical trial conducted in Iran found that plantain ointment improved the healing of second-degree burns more effectively than the standard medical treatment that was the control condition, not equal to, better than. That finding from a peer-reviewed published clinical trial about a common weed should have made headlines in every health news outlet in the country. It largely did not. Because you can't patent a weed, and there's no money in publishing that finding in a way that reaches the general public. The leaves contain compounds including aucubin and verbascicide that have documented wound healing, anti-inflammatory, and antimicrobial effects on skin tissue. This is established science in the herbal research literature. Here's the field application that every child in America should be taught. If you're outside and you get stung by a bee, bit by a mosquito, or scrape your skin on something rough, find a plantain leaf and you will find one, because they're everywhere. Pick it, chew it briefly to rupture the cell walls and release the active compounds, or crush it hard between your palms if you'd rather not chew it. Press the crushed leaf directly onto the sting or cut and hold it there for 5 to 10 minutes. The pain and swelling from insect stings typically begins to decrease within minutes. This is not placebo. This is direct pharmacological action from real compounds on real tissue. At home, make a strong infusion from dried plantain leaves, 2 tablespoons per cup. Steeped 20 minutes. Let it cool completely. Use it as a wound wash for cuts and scrapes, as a gentle eye rinse for mild irritation, or soak a cloth in it and apply as a compress to inflamed or irritated skin anywhere on the body. It follows us everywhere we go. It always has. The kindest plant in the world, still doing what it's always done, still waiting at your feet for the moment you look down and finally see it. Number 20, Meadowsweet Filipendula omaria, the original aspirin growing in the ditch. And here we are. Number 20. The one I've been building toward, because this one doesn't just tell you about a plant. This one tells you the whole story of what happened to our relationship with the natural world, and why videos like this one exist. Filipendula omaria, Meadowsweet, those creamy, fragrant, foam-like clusters of white flowers that spill over the banks of streams and overflow the edges of wet ditches every July. Across the American heartland, the ones that smell of almonds and honey in summer all at once, that is one of the most important medicinal plants in the history of Western civilization. And almost no one driving past it on a country road knows what they're looking at. Here's the history that matters. In the 1830s, chemists began isolating and studying the active compounds in plants that had been used medicinally for centuries. In meadowsweet, which had been used for pain, fever, and inflammation in Europe and early America for generations, they identified salicylic acid derivatives. Those compounds, modified and synthesized in a laboratory in the 1890s into acetylsalicylic acid, became the drug we know as aspirin. The word aspirin itself comes from spirea, which was the old botanical name for aspirin is literally named after this plant. And then they patented the synthetic version, sold it back to us in a white tablet, and nobody looked at the ditch anymore. But here's what was lost in that transaction, and this is what the pharmaceutical model of the 19th and 20th centuries consistently failed to account for. The whole plant works differently from the isolated compound. Meadowsweet contains the same salicylate chemistry as aspirin. Yes, which means it reduces pain, fever, and inflammation in the same basic way. But meadowsweet also contains mucilaginous tannins and other compounds that coat and protect the stomach lining. Traditional American and European herbalists used meadowsweet specifically to treat stomach ulcers. They were giving people pain relief and protecting the stomach at the same time, with one plant from the ditch for free. Aspirin, the synthetic isolated version, famously damages the stomach lining. The opposite of what the original plant did. They took nature's formulation, isolated the part they could patent, discarded the balancing wisdom, and then spent decades trying to solve the side effect problem that the original plant never had. That is the story of It is the story of all 20 plants on this list. We didn't lose this knowledge because it stopped working. We lost it because we stopped paying attention. Here's how to bring it back into your life. Gather meadowsweet flower heads in the height of summer when they're fully open and at their most fragrant usually. July or early August, depending on where you live. Dry them quickly to preserve that remarkable almond honey fragrance. To make the tea, use 2 to 3 teaspoons of dried flowers per cup of water that has just come off the boil. not a full rolling boil, which can damage the delicate volatile compounds. Cover the cup while it steeps for 10 minutes, so nothing escapes with the steam. Add a small amount of raw honey. Drink 2 to 3 cups for headaches, mild fever, joint aches, and digestive inflammation. The flavor is delicate, floral, slightly sweet, and genuinely pleasant in a way that most medicinal herbs are not. One note for safety: if you have a known sensitivity to aspirin or treat Metasweet with the same caution, as the chemistry is related. This plant is still out there, still growing in every wet ditch and streamside meadow across the country, still offering what it has offered since long before there was an aspirin tablet or a drugstore to sell it in. The original version, the complete version, the one that worked without the side effects, we didn't improve on it. We just forgot it was there. 20 plants growing in ditches, in lawns, in the cracks of city sidewalks and the edges of country roads and the forgotten corners of old farmland and the stream banks that nobody walks along anymore. None of them need us to plant them. None of them need fertilizer, irrigation, special soil, or a gardener's care. They ask for absolutely nothing. They have never asked for anything. They just grow and wait and offer the knowledge that our grandparents held quietly in their hands. The names, the preparations, the deep familiarity with the land around their homes, that knowledge didn't vanish when we stopped teaching it. It went dormant, the way seeds go dormant in winter, waiting for the right conditions to come back up. That's what's happening right now. People are remembering. People are asking the questions that should have been passed down and weren't. People are walking out into their backyards and looking at what's actually growing there instead of just deciding what should be eliminated. You don't have to become a full-time herbalist to make this knowledge part of your life. You don't need a homestead or 5 acres or a special education. You need to start small and stay curious. Learn one name this week. Find one plant on your next walk and look it up when you get home. Make 1 cup of tea from something you gathered yourself. That's how it comes back. Not in a classroom, in a cup. In a salve you made on a Saturday afternoon. In a moment when someone gets stung at a picnic and you walk over to the edge of the grass, pick a plantain leaf and show a child what the land already put there. Nature has not forgotten any of this. It's been here the whole time. It's only us who forgot, and we are remembering now. If something in today's video touched something real in you, if you felt something old and true moving in your chest as you watched, then share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these 20 plants is already growing near your home. Which one you're going to look for this week. Which one surprised you most? And if you haven't joined our community yet, that subscribe button is right there. Jingy the bell. This is what we do here every week. We keep this knowledge alive together. I am the Earth Keeper, and I will see you in the garden.